Welcome to Cody and the Cinema. Today I'm discussing the 1968 classic, Romeo and Juliet. This is a film I've long admired, especially as an English teacher. I saw parts of this whenever I was in, say, ninth grade, and I think a lot of us who have had an experience with this in the classroom or any experience with Shakespeare in general probably will find at least something we like in it. I rewatched segments of this because, unfortunately, Olivia Hussey did pass away, the lead actress who played Juliet, who you may also recognize if you're a horror fan from Black Christmas. She was wonderful in that particular film. And I think of many great Shakespeare film adaptations I've watched, this might be about my favorite. I put a few others here that I like as well. I'm especially partial to Throne of Blood and Richard III. Gorgeous Technicolor, but film there, but I was rewatching and I even was reading to the essay some, and this does include an essay if you get the Criterion version. And I loved what it had to say about the opening scene. Romeo and Juliet begins with a composition that testifies to Zeffirelli's love of visual splendor. The leisurely crane shot of a period cityscape of Verona, Italy, beneath a dissipating fog, and then the essay also points out that Laurence Olivier himself delivers that opening prologue, two households both alike in dignity. And it's so effective, especially we're brought into the chaos of the Capulet and Montague feud almost immediately. When I taught this with students, I think they had this idea that Romeo and Juliet was purely some calming love story similar to a weak YA romance. And that's not the case. This movie is immediately violent. A huge brawl that breaks out between these two families in the streets. And almost, when I was watching it again, of course I had recently rewatched Mean Streets, and the intensity and the brutality of that film and the childishness of the fighting, it almost reminded me of the bar scene, that really good bar scene with the tracking shots in Mean Street. That's the kind of intensity that we get in later on at the film's turning point, when there's a huge brawl that has big implications for the story. Again, that's one of the best fight scenes I've ever seen in a movie in terms of a sword fight and just kind of an all-out brawl. So the violence in this movie is primal, much like the love between Romeo and Juliet. And again, sometimes people don't understand like some of what Shakespeare's about in terms of tone and content. I have a little interesting story here I like to share, or at least I think it's interesting. I remember going with a group of people who were expecting Shakespeare to be sort of wholesome family entertainment to a show in Stanton, Virginia at the Blackfriars, which is a great place to see Shakespeare live if you ever get the chance. And we watched, I think it was A Midsummer's Night Dream, and all the double entendres and meanings and so forth really caught them off guard. And you see that early on in the scene with Juliet and her nurse. You know, the nurse talks about the husband holding up a child, and if you know this scene I'm talking about, like, this movie's a little, but some of the humor, like, it's not wholesome at all. And I think it's hilarious, and the humor is wonderful, especially with the nurse, and it's always been funny to me. I mean, no matter how many times I see that nurse, she cracks me up, of course, until some tragedies happen that cause you to maybe even dislike the nurse later on, but wonderful character there. Now, I have long been a fan, just the Mercutio in this film. So the actors who played Mercutio over the years, there have been many, many good ones, but this guy who plays him, John McInnery, I mean, the playfulness, the quick temper, the desire to be such a show-off. That Queen Mab speech, when he starts out kind of having a good time talking about this dream with Queen Mab, which I think is one of the great Shakespearean speeches, and the way he loses his mind very quickly, of course, that sets up and foreshadows some of the conflicts that happen later in the streets. But that speech, like, has always been a favorite of mine, besides, you know, a few other really good ones. There's a really good one in Richard III, of course, there, Olivier himself, with that great opening sequence. But that in and of itself is entertaining. Mercutio is continually entertaining this film. But what really sells the emotional core of this movie, for me at least, is when those two, Romeo and Juliet, first meet. And Olivia Hussey just did a phenomenal at communicating so much with her face and her expression and her eyes. And when there's the dialogue where they're talking about "give me my sin," or they compare love to sin and so forth. It's just a brilliant scene of watching them come together. And of course, the director brilliantly uses that wonderful music. And it is such a joyful relationship for them both. But when things do turn dark, Olivia Hussey is very good at, there's a scene where she immediately wants something. If you haven't seen the play, she's in desperate want of something, and it's a dark scene, and she just kind of says, like, "give it to me." And the zoom in of her face and like is terrifying. This is a great dramatic actress. And for all the controversy over the years that has surrounded these young actors, I did want to celebrate the actual quality of their acting here, because those two had such good chemistry, and I think they really delivered on these roles in a unique and special way, despite whatever budget constraints they were under. For me, Romeo and Juliet is at its best in the first half. I've always felt like after the big shakeup in the streets in the middle, the play's a little less interesting, a little less believable, a little bit less rooted in reality. And I don't know if anyone else feels that way or not. But when we do get toward the end and we're in the tombs and so forth, like, it's almost like a horror movie. We've almost switched genres there. And you can see where the actress would do something like Black Christmas. And for all of the like silly costumes and limitations that this thing might have had, it has remained a powerful, profound piece of cinema that is gorgeous to look at. I mean, if you've only seen this as a VHS copy, like from your library or something, or like the teacher, rolled up a cart and you had to like do the rewind thing with commercials and so forth, you really owe it to yourself to see the nice Criterion Blu-ray here. And I think you're going to be very captivated by some of the fight scenes, especially the scenes with Mercutio. Again, that sequence in the middle, that big drawn out fight, very compelling piece of filmmaking that I've had students watch that. I mean, they cannot believe how, like, kids that have no other interest in literature will watch that scene and they'll be invested because it's so real. The turn of the emotions, the whole way that thing is choreographed, it's incredible. All the choreography in the entire movie. So do yourself a favor and check this out again if you haven't. And there are other great characters in here as well. I think the person who plays the friar does a really good job. But those are just some of the thoughts I've had about it. I've seen this movie many times, and I have such a respect for it. And I am glad it's in the Criterion Collection. If there are other Shakespeare movies, obviously, like this Throne of Blood, this Macbeth remix, if you will, that Akira Kurosawa did, great picture. But this one always will have a special place for me. So what are your thoughts on Romeo and Juliet? Have you seen it? Do you like it? Do you want to see it? Do you have another Shakespeare, film in the collection that you enjoy? I've covered Shakespeare on here before. I have a video about, some of my favorites of the Shakespeare movies, but I'd love to hear from you. If you like the content and want to click that like button, always does help grow the YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't, and please consider doing that. It does help grow the channel, and I love hearing from you all. It's, you come out here, you talk about movies, it's really cool to see that support. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time on Cody in the Cinema.